I woke up handcuffed to the radiator in my own basement. From down here, no one will ever hear me scream. Perfect. Everything burns around me, and I wonder if the smoke will eventually get me before the flames do. Although, frankly, either is fine with me. I try to just focus on posting this. I'm grateful that I thought to write my account of the prior days during a moment of clarity yesterday. It's too late for me, but maybe sharing this will help someone else out there. I think it's afraid now. It realizes what's about to happen. Its attention must have shifted elsewhere, which is how I even regained control over one of my hands in the first place. I listen to the calming music playing from my speakers upstairs and try to tune out the sound of splintering wood and groaning metal of my own home, and of those around me. Hearing the houses themselves slowly scream out in the pre-dawn hours, I can only imagine the sounds their inhabitants must be making inside. Don't listen, I tell myself. You can't do anything for them. It's better if you don't hear it. Plus, let's be real. They were all gone long before the flames started. If anything, this is my final gift to them, to myself. It is a season of giving after all. My preparations the night before seem to be working nicely. The music has fallen silent, replaced by a roar indicating the flames have reached a trail of gasoline leading down the wooden basement stairs. I guess the time has come. My body, and the thing in control of it, most of it, fights against the metal, increasingly warm as it digs into my wrist. It wants to live. It wants to spread. Too damn bad. I planned for this. It's powerless, imprisoned by this house as much as I'm imprisoned by it. That thought brings me some peace. Day 1. I saw my neighbor, Miss Brevlick, Miss B, as she'd asked us to call her, struggling with a package on her porch and offered to help her bring it inside. It was small, only a foot by a foot or so, but unexpectedly heavy, even for me. Wow. Order something exciting? I huffed as I brought it in for her. She beamed, told me it was a gift from her grandson. I'd never heard her mention kids, much less grandkids. I'd never seen pictures of any family in her house, the times I'd been over to visit or check on her in years. I always thought she was a bit of a loner, a preview of what I myself might be in 50 years. Day 2. I ran into her again next day at the mailbox. She looked thinner, more fragile, and had this look of confusion in her eyes. Like she was lost, somewhere behind them and struggling to find her way back. She was usually so lucid. The rapid deterioration that seemed to occur just overnight really worried me. I kept asking if she was okay, but she waved off my concerns. She said she was just sleep-deprived. She'd been up all night with nightmares. Her nose was dripping something the consistency of blood, but the color was wrong. It was too dark, tarry looking. She didn't seem to notice. So, what did your grandson get you? Who? She squinted at me. The package? Oh, that. Her face lit up and contorted into an unnaturally wide grin. It was exactly what I needed. It was so wonderful, the perfect gift. Day 3. As I left for work, I saw Miss B drop off a package at a house down the street. I gave her a wave and she just stared at me with her eyes narrowed as I drove by. That night, I ran into my neighbor Rosalie, who lives 2 houses down, at the grocery store. She told me Mrs. B had been acting strange. She'd been standing outside Rosalie's living room window for hours in the afternoon, tapping at the glass, her face just inches away from it. I relayed my experience from earlier that morning and agreed that something seemed off. Rosalie said she planned to go check on her, and I asked her to keep me posted. I never heard back from her. Day 4. The next morning, wet and guttural sounds emerged from behind my shard fence with Miss B. Due to the angle and height of the eaves of our houses, I'm able to see into part of her backyard on my driveway camera. I wasn't trying to spy on her. I was truly worried that she was hurt back there. I went to the live feed, and at first I thought she'd fallen because she was on her knees, hunched over. I zoomed in the best resolution would allow and realized she was eating something. Whatever it was, thrashed around a few times before finally falling forever still. As she shifted slightly, I got a better view. No. Not something. Someone. Oh God, it was Rosalie. I wish I hadn't had the volume on, the sounds were awful. The only thing worse than the wet tearing were the profuse apologies between mouthfuls. She was sobbing while she did it. I sat there in shock and disgust, hand over my mouth, but unable to look away as I watched what unfolded. I called the police and shared the camera footage, but the officers I showed up seemed unconcerned, even disinterested. As if they weren't seeing the same thing I was. They told me that they were taking a report and would be in touch, but I couldn't help but notice that they didn't write anything down. They didn't even ask my name. As I watched them drive away, I saw my neighbor Carol bring in a cardboard box from his porch. Day 5. I woke up to what I thought sounded like screaming in the distance. More and more houses in our neighborhood had gone dark, windows shattered, and doors left ajar. I saw Carl standing in the street that afternoon, taking it all in. When I mentioned my encounter with the police the day before, he told me he'd talked to them today and somehow everything was fine. Don't worry about it, he'd said, with a vacant look in his eyes. Day 6. Carl rang my doorbell. He said he got my mail and was holding a box addressed to me from my friend Brent that moved to Milwaukee last year. He didn't seem to notice the blood-like liquid that dripped from his nose and seeped into the cardboard as he held it out to me. After he handed the heavy package over, he seemed confused. Like he wasn't quite sure who I was or why he had come by in the first place. Even though my every rational part of me screamed at myself not to accept it, I found myself carrying the package inside anyways. In the early evening, someone rang my bell. I checked the camera. It was a neighbor across the street. She was wearing clothes still wet with blood and stared directly into my doorbell camera from only a foot or so away. She then let out a throaty shriek and scratched at my front door with her fingernails. I later watched the footage from start to finish and saw her emerge from the house next to hers before she came to mine. I'd already guessed that based on the trail of footprints, but seeing it on video made it all real. The other house continued to sit dark after night fell. The front door still wide open. I called 911 and the dispatcher told me the police were on their way. When hours had passed without me seeing them, I called back and was told that they came by and saw that everything was fine. I replied that I never talked to anyone. They must have come to the wrong address. They agreed to send them back out. While I was waiting, I packed a bag. I didn't know where else to go, but I figured that even if I slept in my car in some parking lot, it had to be better than here. I offered to come to the station, but they told me to wait for them at the address I'd given. So I just paced around my house all night, and I still didn't feel safe even with all the deadbolts locked. They never came. Day 7. I had worse dreams that night before, something forcing itself upwards into my nose and sinuses. The pain was indescribable. It all felt so real. My nose was bleeding when I woke up, which made me wonder. Carl was wandering around the neighborhood looking lost, like he forgot which house was his. As I cleared the empty cardboard box from my kitchen table, I realized that I didn't recall opening it or even know a Brent. Whoever he was, though, he'd given me the most incredible, thoughtful, perfect gift. If I could only remember what it was. I saw my suitcase by the door, but at the time I couldn't remember why I'd packed it. Day 8, I woke up in my backyard, with no memory of how I got there. Just screaming coming from Carl's house, on his own. My nose had been bleeding again, and at times I felt unsure about where I was, what I'd been doing. Sometimes it almost felt as if my body was on autopilot and had a will of its own. I caught myself trying to walk out my front door, carrying a taped-up cardboard box, but as soon as I realized what was happening, I steered myself back inside. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't force my body to cooperate and allow me to destroy the box and its contents. I bluntly tossed it down the stairs into my cluttered basement instead, figuring at least that'd make it harder for me to find. Day 9. I started to write out what had happened in the prior days in my rare moments of lucidity, thinking maybe I could find some way to share it, to prevent this from happening elsewhere. I found myself more and more often a passenger in my own body with only fleeting hours of control. The things I did while I was merely a powerless spectator still sickened me. The guy selling cable door to door didn't deserve that. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the taste of copper out of my mouth. I realized that every single house on my street was either vacant or, much like mine, filthy with bloody drag marks and handprints. I watched the remaining neighbors roam the streets with looks of mindless hunger on their faces. The reality began to sink in that soon enough, I'd be joining them. I knew what was coming next. Unless, just as I had each evening, I watched them shuffle back to their homes for the night. I suppose that even whatever it was that had they become, still needed to sleep. The moment I was fully in control again, I knew I had to act quickly. I had a feeling it would be the final time. I was right. Day 10. I woke up handcuffed to the radiator in my own basement. From down here, no one will ever hear me scream. Perfect.